How many grams of CO2 will be formed when 10.02 grams of propane, which is C3H8, react with 16.5 grams of oxygen? And they give us the reaction right here. By the way, that reaction is a combustion reaction. So this is propane, and propane reacts with oxygen to form CO2 and water. The first thing you do with any equation is check that it's balanced. This one is not balanced because we have 3 carbons here and only here, so we go ahead and balance the carbons. We have 8 hydrogens here and we have only 2 here. That's easily balanced. So that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 oxygens on this side. That means I need a 5 there. This was nice and easy to balance. Okay. So I have 10 grams of propane and I have 16.5 grams of oxygen. The second thing I do after I balance the reaction is that I need to know which one is the limiting reagent. So let's start with, is propane the limiting reagent? Well, they gave me 10.2 grams of propane. The molecular weight of propane is 44. So I'm going to divide by the gram so that I can cancel. It's 44.09 grams of propane in 1 mole of propane. And according to the reaction, 1 mole of propane produces 3 moles of CO2. So 1 mole of propane produces, and I don't know why I did that. Let me erase this real quick. I apologize for the mistake. 3 moles of CO2. All right. So I get 0.6819 moles of CO2 starting with 10 grams of propane, but could oxygen be the limiting reagent? Well, let's calculate it real quick. They gave me 16.5 grams of oxygen. Oxygen is 16 times 2, that's a 32. 32 grams of oxygen is a mole of oxygen. Now, according to the equation, I need 5 moles of oxygen to form 3 moles of CO2. So 5 moles of oxygen to form 3 moles of CO2. Now that I have moles of CO2, I can go ahead and do the calculation. And I forgot something very important. Always check that your units cancel. So grams of oxygen cancels with grams of oxygen. Moles of oxygen cancel with moles of oxygen. And the only unit you have left is mole of CO2. All right, so if I get 10.2 grams of propane, I can make 0.68 moles of CO2. Or the 16.5 grams of oxygen allow me to make 0.31 mole of CO2. This is the smallest amount, so right here. So the oxygen is your limiting reagent. Oxygen is your limiting reagent. We're almost done. Now I need to convert the moles of CO2 to grams of CO2. So 0.310 mole of CO2. We're going to come over here. 1 mole of CO2, if you calculate it, is 44.01 grams of CO2. My units cancel. And that gives me 13.6 grams of CO2 in this reaction. I will have a little bit of propane left over because I only had a small amount of oxygen. I didn't have enough oxygen to react with all the propane. That's why oxygen is your limiting reagent. And I can make 13.6 grams of CO2.